If, like me, you enjoy the lore and the storytelling and the setting of Warhammer 40K, but you don't play the game and have the models, these videos are for you. I'm going to be doing a lore read-through of the Codex Aeldari book, which basically means I'm going to be reading through all of the backstory elements, so the characters, the universe, the world that the Aeldari live in, everything like that. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy this lore read-through of Codex Aeldari. Aeldari, hosts of a fallen empire, the Ancient and the Eldritch. Once the Aeldari ruled the stars, they achieved mastery of time, space, and every other dimension. Now, they are fractured people, brought low by their own hubris. Those that remain are scattered. Sidebar, I'm going to be mispronouncing a lot of words in this video, so if that happens, please just tell me in the comments and I'll learn as I go, so please. Thank you. Those that remain are scattered. The Asuryani of the Craft Worlds, the Harlequins who dwell within the labyrinthine Webway, and the pirates and raiders who follow the path of the outcast. Yet, despite their decline, the Aeldari rail against their certain fate, with great ferocity, skill and foresight. Haunted by sorrow, they battle tirelessly to preserve that which remains and to restore that which once was. As the fires of oblivion reach out from the Great Rift to engulf the galaxy, the dwindling and sorrowful Aeldari know in their hearts that the Rana Dandra approaches and that each and every one of them must answer the call to war. The Aeldari. They are a dwindling species whose history is marked by sorrow and loss. Once, the Aeldari ruled the galaxy, and their history stretches back long before even that glorious era. Those that survive are but a tiny fragment of that stellar empire, striving to preserve what remains of their broken civilization in an age of endless warfare. Many millennia ago, at the height of its power, the Aeldari Empire was a string of glimmering jewels that strung across the galaxy, and its worlds were idyllic paradises. The Aeldari grasp of technology and mastery of the psychic enabled them to wield godlike power, and raise grand and mighty armies that would taste defeat so scarcely as to soon forget its cruel sting. Such was their dominance over the galaxy's other species that the majority of the Aeldari fell into the trap of hubris. This arrogance blossomed into widespread cruelty, depravity, and excess that would have horrifying repercussions for the entire galaxy. Only those few Aeldari who possessed the twin gifts of humility and foresight had the prescience to read in the twisted strands of fate the inevitable doom of their people. Of the fractured and scattered remnants of the Aeldari, the most numerous are the Asuryani. Those are those Aeldari who dwell aboard colossal, void-faring vessels known as Craft Worlds. Most of the Asuryani have long since cast aside any hope of restoring their species to galactic dominance. Instead, guided by their seers, they only seek to ensure the continued survival of their species in a galaxy riven by apocalyptic warfare. The Asuryani were not alone in fleeing the apocalypse. The Harlequins are the followers of Khaine, the Laughing God. They escaped the fall of the Aeldari Empire alongside their patron deity, taking refuge within the Webway, a network of winding pathways that exist within the warp and the material realm. The Harlequins keep the myths of the Aeldari alive, travelling far and wide to reenact these events in dance and song. Thus, all Aeldari learn well the pitfalls of arrogance and pride. They are fierce, unpredictable, and often duplicitous warriors, whose motivations are often impenetrable, even to the most gifted psykers of the Asuryani. Then, there are the Inari, a fringe element of the Aeldari who have drawn adherents to their macabre use of each and every faction of the wider species. These fanatics are worshippers of Enid, the Aeldari god of the dead. Their every action is bent towards raising their deity to life, and by doing so restoring their dwindling species to its former glory. The resurrection of Enid is a task to which the Inari are utterly committed, and that they will make terrible sacrifices to see done. As the galaxy slides further into strife, so do the goals and methods of this increasingly zealous splinter faction become ever more extreme. Children of the Stars. Physically, Aeldari superficially resemble humans, but this comparison is one-dimensional to the point of pointlessness. In their physiology, psyches, and souls, they are utterly alien. Most Aeldari are taller than the average human, their limbs are longer and their frames are slighter. Yet despite their apparent fragility, they possess a surprisingly supple strength. Their facial features are striking and well defined, and the skin is often pale. Their keen ears are pointed, and their eyes possess a piercing quality that is more reminiscent of a hunting feline than a human. Their senses are finely honed, allowing them to experience heightened ecstasy through food, music, perfumes, physical beauty, and touch that no human could ever hope to understand. Conversely, they can feel revulsion in their experiences beyond most other species. All Aeldari are graceful and elegant, and their every movement laden with subtle intent. Indeed, gestures are as significant in Aeldari communication and etiquette as the spoken word. In battle, the Aeldari handle their weapons with phenomenal grace, balance, and skill. The metabolism of an Aeldari is fast and efficient. Their hearts beat swiftly, and their keen minds can process thoughts, possibilities, and emotions so quickly and intensely that even the dullest of their kind would be considered a once-in-a-century genius by lesser species. Their internal organs and immune systems function with far greater efficiency, and they are largely unaffected by aging. Their bodies and minds remain strong, despite the passage of centuries. Provided they are not struck down in battle, the Aeldari can live for millennia, thanks to their hyperactive physiology and neurology, enjoy lives rich in sensation and wonder without the threat of illness or disease. In addition to their physical attributes, all Aeldari are psychic to an extent. It is said amongst the Assyriani that, at the height of their species' power, the ancient Aeldari could read thoughts with a glance, and that whose training for that battle could disarm a foe or crush an opponent's weapon with a narrowing of the eyes. Even now, the Aeldari retain great psychic potency. Consequently, much of their technology is still based on psychic engineering. Their weapons and technology are grown from psychoactive wraithbone and other psycho-responsive materials into the required form, using mental energies alone, and are activated by the psychic signature of their intended operator, rather than through physical manipulation. These advantages are not without cost. The exhilaration of battle, the intellectual rewards of study, and the rush of physical exertion may each induce a transcendental bliss for the Aeldari. Conversely, failure in an endeavour may lead them to experience a soul-crushing sorrow, self-doubt, and abject despair that would shatter the mind of a human. Such intensity of feeling enables the Aeldari to produce wondrous works of art, music, theatre, and literature that are at once spellbinding in their beauty and terrifying in their darkness. Every Aeldari carries this darkness within their soul, and all know that it has the power to consume them should it flourish. The scale of the pleasure that the Aeldari can feel in myriad ways is a temptation they must strive to resist. To give in to this gnawing desire is to invite the same destruction that brought low the works of their ancestors. The Webway. The Webway is a labyrinthine realm that exists between reality and the warp. Created through technologies once taught to the Aeldari by the ancient species known as the Old Ones, its pathways lead to the Craft Worlds, verdant Exodite worlds, and thousands of other locations throughout the galaxy. Though the Webway still connects many Aeldari planets and craft worlds, the baleful energies of the Fall ruptured some of its hyperspatial pathways, and the opening of the Great Rift further damaged its integrity. Large regions of the Webway have now been infringed upon by servants of chaos. Although it poses great dangers to the Asuryani, the Webway is also an essential resource. Fearful of using the warp to traverse great distances like other species, the Webway's arterial passageways allow the craft worlders to cross the lengths of the galaxy. It is said that Eldanash is the father of our people, fathered by Kurnaus, the hunter, and birthed by Isha, the mother. At first, he lived alone upon the barren face of our ancient home. The world upon which he lived was empty, and as he gazed upon its barren expanse, his forlorn heart ached. So, Isha, in her motherly love, wept a single tear of sorrow for her mortal son. Where her tear fell, burst forth the first life. Sunlit skies, verdant forests, and deep oceans sprang into existence, and with them all the creatures of land, air, and sea. And Eldanash rejoiced in her love, feeling only boundless gratitude towards Isha. It is this love that the Mother Goddess gifted to our people. In those first days, Eldanash and the first of the Aeldari communed freely with the gods, and from then, they were granted the gifts of insight and emotion that would drive our people to greatness and yet doom them also. In harmony did gods and mortals thrive, yet all would soon come to ruin, for even the gods themselves were slaves to their own desires. Long before the birth of Eldanash, Kurnaus and Lilith were bound in courtship. Khaine, Lord of Murder, looked upon the betrothed with furious envy, for he had long borne an unrequited love for the maiden. By every method he could conceive did he seek her hand, and yet at every attempt he was denied. So did jealousy smoulder and burn within the god's bitter heart. Much time passed until Kurnaus's boundless desire saw him spurn Lilith in favour of Isha. By their union was born Eldanash. Lilith hid her jealousy beneath a facade of smiles and laughter, her envy curdling into resentment. One night, she saw a vision of Khaine being torn apart by an army of mortal warriors. A plot of vengeance began to form within her mind. In secret, Lilith did whisper into the ear of Khaine, describing unto him the horrors she had witnessed in her mind's eye. The Lord of Murder perceived her words as prophecy and took up his blade. Just as Lilith had planned, Khaine's fury had been awakened. The war god resolved to slaughter every mortal Aeldari. Lilith smiled broadly, for Kurnaus and Isha would soon know true grief. So did Khaine stride into the mortal realm and vent his seething anger upon Isha's children. When the mother learned of his murderous onslaught and of the suffering he had wrought upon those she loved, she wept uncontrollably. Her keening wails of grief rippled through heaven with such anguish that almighty Asurian could not help but hear them. The Phoenix King soon learned of all that had transpired. Asurian, with the same wisdom he gifted to the Aeldari, forged an impenetrable barrier between heaven and the mortal realm. So was Khaine's murderous rampage halted. Yet Isha knew no end to her sorrow, for though her progeny were safe from the attentions of the Lord of Murder, she could no longer communicate with her beloved offspring. How poor, sorrowful Isha wept for that which she had lost. She had been torn from her children by the Lord of Murder's jealous rage, and her own father's pitiless justice. Khaine too felt the pang of sorrow within his breast until he could stand no longer to gaze upon his beloved Isha's wretched misery. To Vol, the Master Smith, Isha and Khaine pleaded for aid, knowing that only he could undo Assyrian's celestial artifice. Vol, uncle of Khaine and Isha, while reluctant to break his brother Assyrian's decree, could not bear to hear his niece's weeping. He sympathised with her plight and agreed to aid the parents' cause. From Isha's streaming tears, he forged waystones that sparkled like stars. Through those shimmering jewels, Isha could once more speak to her children, so she did. Isha and Khaine taught much to the Aeldari, keeping their communication with their children secret from the other gods. Yet, as time passed, the two became arrogant, certain that none would discover their transgressions. In one such careless moment, Khaine overheard them. Bitter, jealous, and desperate for vengeance, Khaine brought all he had heard to his brother. Disappointment and anger coursed through Assyrian in equal measure. He had been disobeyed because of his parents' love for their children, but he had been disobeyed nonetheless. Though it pained him greatly, Assyrian declared before his fellow gods that Isha and Khaine were to be turned over to Khaine to do with as he saw fit. The mother and the hunter were secured with bounds of flame and scorching iron and cast into a burning pit to endure the torments of the Lord of Murder, far from the sight of mortals and gods alike. For countless years they suffered Khaine's torment, deprived of the light of the heavens and severed from the children that they loved. Vol begged Khaine to show mercy on his niece and nephew. Guilt racked his soul, for he had aided them in their scheme and longed to see them freed. After much bargaining, an accord was reached. The Master Smith would forge 100 swords for the Lord of Murder, each mightier than the last. In return for Vol's artifice, Khaine would free his prisoners. Khaine granted Vol but a single year to complete this task. Vol laboured day and night, fashioning blades the like of which no mortal hand could strike. Each was a wondrous work of art, wrought in star metal, sun bronze, and the dust of shattered nebulae. Yet, as the year drew to a close, Vol knew he had failed, for a single sword remained incomplete. To conceal this failing, which would have seen this agreement with Khaine voided, the Master Smith turned to trickery. Amongst the newly forged weapons, he hid a blade of mortal construction. When Khaine discovered the deception, his rage was terrifying to behold. Branding Vol a cheat and liar, he demanded vengeance. The war in heaven had begun. This conflict cast the gods against one another, and the heavens shook with the thunder of battle. The Aeldari too were divided by conflict as the fighting bled into the mortal realm. Only great Assyrian, in his infinite wisdom, refused to align himself with any other. Thus, when the war ended, the Phoenix King remained Lord of all and Khaine both. The final battle of this conflict saw Vol and Khaine cross swords in single combat. Vol wielded the blade Anaris, Light of Dawn, the 100th blade he had promised to Khaine, now completed and imbued with all the art of his mastery. Despite the might of Anaris, however, Vol could not match Khaine's martial prowess. The Forge God was overpowered and cast out of heaven. Broken in mind and body, Khaine would later enslave Vol, strapping him to his anvil with iron chains of his own creation. Khaine roared in his triumph and reached down to claim Anaris as his own. Yet at the moment of the Lord of Murder's victory, Falshu the Falcon, consort of the Great Hawk, descended to pluck Anaris up in his giant talons. As Khaine cried out in impotent fury, Falshu bore the glimmering weapon to the heavens. Khaine's rage burned bright and hot once more. Still he sought vengeance upon those who had wronged him. Long ago, he had fought side by side with Eldanish, the Lord of Murder, granting his mortal student many victories upon the battlefield and promising him further power in return for his fealty. The upstart mortal had refused and instead taken the side of Isha and Cornaus. So did Khaine descend upon Eldanish in a murderous rage. Falshu, seeing the fight unfold, bore into the hands of Eldanish the great sword of Inaris, her hope that this blade may grant the mortal hero a slim chance of defeating Khaine in battle. However, even armed with Val's finest blade, Eldanish was no match for the god of war. Before he could so much as land a blow upon the Khaine's towering form, the mortal champion was torn apart. The war in heaven had ended, with Khaine its final victor. The Lord of Murder held Inaris aloft and let out a bellow of triumph. As he did so, Falshu and the Great Hawk descended from the heavens and took in their talons the broken body of Eldanish, bearing the dead warrior's corpse aloft and setting it in the firmament. There, it became the Red Moon, which dominated the skies above the Aeldari homeworld for aeons as a constant reminder of the great champion's bloody demise. It remained there until our people descended into depravity, spawned that malefic being we know as She Who Thirsts, and saw the heart of their empire consumed by corruption and evil. However, Khaine's slaughter of Eldanish would not be the final act in the War of Heaven. That honour would fall to Assyria. So appalled was the Phoenix King by the slaying of the first Lord of the Aeldari that he laid upon Khaine a curse. Eldanish's blood would forever drip from the Lord of Murder's hand, reminding all what he had done. Thus, he has been known ever since as Kayla Mensha Khaine, Khaine the Bloody-Handed. So that was part one of my lore read-through of Codex Aeldari. I thought that was really fun to do. I don't know about you, maybe you hated it, whatever. But if you liked it, then please give this video a like, and also comment down below what you'd like me to do next as well. But yeah, the next step is going to be part two, looking at the gods and the pantheon and the fall of the Aeldari Empire. So if that sounds good to you, subscribe to Jam Punch Storytelling. My name is George, and I will see you next time.